Welcome to the NYU Steinhardt Jazz interview series, and today we have the legendary, the great guitarist, composer, band leader, John McLaughlin. John, thank you so much
Dave.
for coming today.
I'm not dead yet. I'm not a legend yet.
Well, we think you're a legend here.
You're very sweet, thank you.
I want to talk to you about your life, your career, and really I want to make this about the musicians who will watch this, and because they're all looking for a path, a career path, opportunities. And you know, from looking at your career, from me researching your career, it seems like you've lived many lives. You came from.
Well, I'm getting old, Dave.
But it's like, you know, you came from England. You were initiated with like the blues, American blues that came over. But then you also heard Django Reinhardt, which I clearly hear in your playing as well. Let's start there, because I think, you know, just from me looking randomly at your life, you could have had another path if you wouldn't have maybe found jazz.
Maybe. Yeah, I think we should start a little before that, because I studied piano, classical piano, before I took up the guitar. And really, I owe it all to my mother, who was an amateur violinist and loved music dearly. She was in an amateur orchestra. So I grew up with classical music constantly, so that really marked me. And I mean, you can see the effects later on in my life with the different projects that I got involved with specifically the two pieces for guitar and orchestra. Mm-hmm. Because classical music I still listen to classical music. It's so beautiful. I mean, some great composers. And I think jazz has an enormous debt to classical music, because the harmony that we use in jazz really came from the European composers and subsequently the American.
Was there anything specifically that you listened to in classical music that transcended into like the harmonies? Was there composers?
I mean, any of the I mean, the big event for me musically was when I heard Herbie for the first time, and Herbie and Bill Evans, and you know, these two steeped in the French Impressionist music, whether it's Satie or Debussy, Ravel. I mean, the harmonies that jazz subsequently became founded on, or derived directly from these composers. And then of course you have when McCoy came on the scene, and you could hear his, if I dare say, Bartokian influence, you know, especially with these quartal harmonies that Bartok was so fond of. So I think jazz has got enormous debt to classical music. But on the other hand, I think in these days, classical music has its own debt towards jazz now, I think. Mm-hmm. But the impact of growing up with a mother who was a classical player just had a lasting impact on me, you know. Okay, by the time I was 11, the guitar came in, thanks to my older brothers. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and fortunately, they were university students, and we're going back here toward, say, 1953, 52, 53, when the blues movement, which you spoke about before, it hit Britain. I mean, big time.
Did you see any of those blues guys when they came over, like Howlin' Wolf or?
No, I saw Bill Brunzi.
Oh, wow.
Wonderful. And then Muddy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. Muddy Waters just really had a powerful impact on me. And I was really young. I mean, don't forget this, like, I'm coming out of this classical thing. And because of my brothers got bored with the guitar, it ended up in my hands, and I became totally enamored with the guitar. I just loved it. And I stopped playing piano immediately. And because of my brothers were at university and affected by this blues boom that was sweeping the UK, they were bringing home the blues records, guitar records. So from 11 years old, I was exposed to the most beautiful, radical, different kind of music. Can you imagine just growing up with classical music? All of a sudden you hear Howlin' the Wolf or Bill Brunsey or Muddy Waters. But early Muddy Waters, when Muddy was playing acoustic guitar with Little Walter on harmonica, and subsequently Otis Spann on piano. But he had an acoustic trio that was just dynamite. You know, I just was crazy about this music. It was a revelation for me, Dave.
Was he tuning his guitar in what they called the Spanish style at that time, where you'd use the slide? I guess it was.
Yeah, he
tuned in
was.
fifths,
He was
yeah.
using the slide. I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
I had no idea how he was doing what he was doing. But no, and Big Bill Brunsey, he was used regular thing, but he had this independence in his right hand, where he'd keep the beat going on the bass strings, then he'd be playing melodies and stuff on the upper strings and singing at the same time. You know, for Muddy it was a whole other thing, but it was beautiful. Which later we all saw, of course, when Jimmy came out, because Jimmy's singing was directly taken out of Muddy's book.
So did you try to sing as well?
Yeah, I tried. It was hopeless, hopeless. Unfortunately, could have been a star.
So how did your trajectory switch away from maybe all the guys that you were hanging out with or eventually played with that were into the rock and roll thing? Was it because of guys like Django?
You know, this is before rock and roll.
Yes.
You know,
Right.
I'm up there, Dave. You know. So for me, I mean, if you're looking at it from a chronological point of view, out of the classical, it was straight into the Mississippi blues directly. I mean, and I was just swimming in it, in that Mississippi, and it was just beautiful. And of course, you know, the impact stayed with me. But then gradually, as my older brothers, who actually my debt to them is enormous, as well as my mom, they were bringing home records of Django Reinhardt, for example, and flamenco on all guitar, because they saw right away that, because they played the guitar for 6 months and they'd just gotten bored, and they saw me and I was taking the guitar to bed. You know, I was hugging that guitar day and night, and so they were really happy about that. So they very encouraging, and they were bringing home many records, as many records as they could afford, concerning guitar. And so I was exposed in kind of rapid succession chronologically, from the blues to, first was flamenco, that very powerful impact on me, and then Django, and eventually Miles, going through Dizzy and Bird with the bebop, of course.
And all these records were readily available to you?
Well, they were available to them, to my brothers, you know. Yeah.
So they were in record shops at that time in England.
Oh, the record, yeah. I mean, the record shop was a haven, wasn't it?
Yes.
You grew up with record stores. Hey, you go in there and you try the record and you with your friends. I mean, it's where you could hang out and listen. I know, it's gone. Isn't it sad?
Yeah, it is sad.
Yeah, I miss it. But,
well,
you know, life goes on. But so you can see from a musical point of view that I was bombarded with a number of musical cultures that culminated in Miles, and Train, and you know. And
well, to go back to Django for one moment, I was watching a video clip of you on the Johnny Carson Tonight Show playing Cherokee. Faster than I had ever heard it.
Yeah, and the rehearsal was not that fast, but that's Eddie Shaughnessy. What a drummer. And that was a great band, the Doc Severinsen band. Yes. I know, because in the rehearsal, Doc said, you know, well, what tempo you want to play? I said, well, you can play it up tempo. Okay, so we played it up tempo. It was nice. And then on the live show, I mean, Eddie Shaughnessy kicked in the tempo, and I'm thinking, what? What am I going to do here, you know? But it's like, you know, you do or you die,
Yes.
you know, on live TV. So you got to just go
Well,
for
you
it,
didn't
you know?
die.
It
That
was
was- it
far
was
out.
great. It
Yeah,
was great.
it was a far out experience. You know, but Django, of course, he had this beautiful facility.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. And he had it on 2 fingers.
Did you try to play with the 2-finger technique like him?
No. No, I never tried. I mean, I couldn't even do it with 5, 10, 15, what he does with 2. Django was a phenomenon. He was just phenomenal.
You didn't get a chance to hear him live.
No.
'Cause he would have.
Not that old, Dave.
He would have passed in the 50s, I think, right?
Yeah, but I was really young.
Yeah, that's true.
You know.
That's true. The thing that's sketchy about what I couldn't find out was you're in England, and then Tony Williams calls you to come and play in his band.
Oh, this is much later.
Yeah, well, well, this is what I don't understand, because I don't see how you connected with him, and maybe there's a thread. Was that the
Well, the
first time
thread,
you came to the
the
US?
thread, in the end, is down to love, isn't it? It's like it's love is everything, and if you know whatever you love, then that will this kind of a mutual attraction between those things. And so, if we could, you know, I have to come back to Miles, and there's one point I have to mention that relates to a track on an album he made, I think it was in '58. What's the name of the album? The name of the track was Blues for Pablo,
Oh, that
with the
would
Gil
have been-
Evans Big Band,
Yeah.
small big band.
Miles
And-
Ahead? Oh,
Miles-
no, it was
yes.
Sketches of Spain.
No, Miles
Miles
Ahead.
Ahead.
Yeah. And Blues for Pablo. So 58, I would be 16.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be a flamenco guitar player, actually. But I was living in this little town way up in the northeast of England, just south of Scotland, you know. I mean, nobody, you know, what's flamenco, you know. So that was out. And to play flamenco, you really needed a teacher, and which was impossible dream.
Did you know that dance was connected to flamenco at the time?
That who?
That dancing was connected to flamenco at the time, or you just heard the records?
I had the guitar players, Dave, you know, and the singers, of course, but it was the guitar playing. I'm a guitar player. They were playing my instrument, and playing it in such beautiful ways. I mean, it's a beautiful system and beautiful culture, the flamenco culture, the Hispanic culture. And so much so, I used to skip school at the end of every month and hitchhike down to Manchester, where I had one of my elder brothers was at university, because he'd sneak me into a pub where there was a real flamenco guitar player, Pepe Martinez. And I used to sit and watch this guy. I saw him 3 or 4 times. I got into trouble at school, of course, but I didn't care anyway. I just wanted to play guitar. But that was relates directly to when I heard this Blues for Pablo, because I realized that I mean, you look, and this is fusion music. Because Miles, anyway, always played the blues. He'd be playing the standard, he's still playing the blues. But all of a sudden, you hear this beautiful Hispanic wave and tone and atmosphere coming. Because Miles loved the Hispanic thing. I mean, you could hear it in his playing. And that record, that track in particular, was, I think, a classic example of fusion, early fusion music, fusion jazz, if you want.
So what happened to your flamenco career?
It died.
Yeah. Because something else came
I got
along.
caught by jazz.
Yeah.
I got caught by jazz. I got caught by Miles. And to relate to your previous question, I would get every record. I mean, when Milestones came out, it came out subsequently after the Miles Ahead and the Sketches of Spain and with Coltrane, Cannonball, and Red Garland, Philly Joe, Paul Chambers. What a sextet! What
Now,
a sextet!
did you see those guys? Did they travel to Europe? You didn't have a chance to see them live?
No, not Coltrane. I saw Miles live, yeah. But later
But
with
not
Wayne.
with that classic group.
But I followed the careers from that point. I mean, look, it was 58, 59. Because Kind of Blue came out in 59, which was another mind-blowing revelation. Because that was Bill and Bill. Because don't forget, I studied piano. And I heard Bill for the first time on the Kind of Blue album. I mean, it was just the definitive kind of piano playing, jazz piano playing. And so I followed all of them, really, from that point until Miles. He had the quintet. Cannonball went off on his own with his brother, and Miles, he had the quintet with Coltrane, and they made there's some great records of that quintet around. You know, it's the classic story of Coltrane playing the long solos. You know, I'm sure you know the one that Jimmy Cobb tells about. And so, of course, through every evolution of Miles, I followed him. I followed them all. And in 65, of course, another pivotal year for me was the Love Supreme, because that affected me in different ways, but also the Miles in Europe, where Tony was on. He would be 18, I think, around that time. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe Tony. It was just too much. He was perfect. And what he did to Miles, because you know how cool Miles was prior to that. All those records in the late 50s. Yeah, he was like kind of slowly burning. But when Tony joined the band, he caught fire. Miles was on fire. I mean, you listen to those records, and that's Tony. And of course, subsequently, when I got to know Miles, and I knew, I mean, he loved Tony to death. He loved him. And in fact, when I came to join Tony, Miles wasn't happy because he was losing Tony. He didn't want to lose Tony. But those recordings, you know, were amazing. So we're looking at 65. But I should just interject a little something here, because thinking about my life as a musician is relevant to my life as a seeker, too. Because this, in fact, there are two aspects to my life, as I see kind of threads. And one is particularly from the 60s, mid-60s, when we all started to drop acid and ask the great existential questions of life, which is what acid will do to you. And so to figure out, is growing up in a completely agnostic family, but with a lot of discussions going on about the existence of God and what is God anyway, and what's this universe, and what is this unbelievable universe we're living in, infinite and eternal, and here we are, just, you know, for a few years and then disappear. I mean, what is the whole meaning of it all, you know? And so these questions became important to me, as to a lot of people at that period. And the search for meaning was directly related to my musical development, because I felt already at that point that you can play a lot of notes, but the thing is what about you, the inner life that you have? And I had this undeniable conviction that I had to have a richer inner life. If I had a richer inner life, then I felt that my music would be richer as a consequence. And so the impact of Love Supreme was really pivotal for me when that album came out. in spite of the fact that I had no idea what he was playing. And I've been listening to him for 7 years with the Miles albums. And then, of course, with his own albums, Giant Steps and the great ones, Until Love Supreme. And it took a year of listening on a daily basis to Love Supreme for me to finally hear what he was doing musically. But I knew it was related to what he wrote on the rear side, this beautiful poem, prayer, yes, whatever you want to call it. This was an expression of a very profound degree of spiritual awareness, and beautiful and elegant and eloquent, which is the words he sought in his words, but it was the characteristics he sought in his music too. And so that was tremendously encouraging for me to get this record and read the poem and then try to figure out what he was doing. It took a long time.
Well, how did you take that information and use it for yourself?
Well, after I dropped acids enough, I stopped, because it's anyways not addictive or anything, and I started meditating. And because I had to figure out what's going on, when you're a young 20-year-old, and you're trying to finding your way in music is hard, especially in jazz music, because you got to improvise. And when you're improvising, what are you going to say? What are you going to talk about? And there's only one thing we can speak about when we improvise, is the story of our life. How we relate to ourselves, to our instrument, to the music, to our comrades, to the universe itself. It's all about how we do it and how deeply we feel about it.
Now, the interesting thing is, if you would have discovered, maybe been 10 years older, and you would have grown up in a different time, because in the 1960s, mid-60s, this was a lot of people were looking towards India for meditation.
Of course.
And things.
Me
if
too.
If you would have been 10 years older, you would have had a career 10 years earlier, you might have become a different person.
I certainly would have.
Yeah. So you were placed in time at a specific point.
Yeah.
You think that's
a
divine
lot of
providence, or?
All us hippies, Dave, for all of that time. It was an amazing decade, the 60s.
So who helped you through that? I know you had...
The musicians, the music, the albums.
But you also had your spiritual leaders, Sri Chinmoy.
Oh yeah, subsequently. I mean, but even before I left the UK, I started meditating. I joined a school of meditation, even though I didn't find it very deep. Nevertheless, there's always something you can take out of it, and I took out the fact that to sit down and watch what goes on in your mind is a very significant activity. Instead of a kind of, being focused on the exterior, is what is going on in the interior. And when you do this over a period of time, then you really start to figure out, because all kinds of stuff comes out of your subconscious when you meditate, and you start to see more who you are, what you are.
Now,
that's all, and but that's very important knowledge.
That is important.
I mean, it's important to me. It was important to me, and continues to be important to me since I meditate. Anyway, I still meditate.
I want you to unpack this for me, because there's different paradigms for people being musicians, and why they're musicians. Some of them, they're just practitioners. They're just worker bees.
Yeah, I know.
Go and play Broadway, whatever, and play third violin on Cats for 30 years. And
I've been there.
Right. So where did it come from you? Was it the music hit you that significantly that you said there has to be more, and I'm going to find it?
Well, let me put it in very briefly in an anecdote, because as I mentioned earlier when we were chatting, I was I became a member of the Ray Ellington Quartet, which had the hardest guitar book in the world. I mean, it was just a monster. It was a monster. By the time I left that gig, I was reading anything. And so I started to get called for sessions. I mean, it's just pop music. But from being, a struggling, starving guitar player, all of a sudden, I had money in my pocket, Even though the music was mainly rubbish, and it was a very nice feeling to have some money in my pocket. I'll tell you, it was very nice. And I did it for, I would say, 15 months. And I was doing other things on the side. I was playing with I put on my own group together, and I was playing with different jazz bands, because to make a living as a jazz player anywhere is really difficult, and it was very hard there. So I was making money playing this pop music, and but I'll never forget the day where I quit. I had 2 sessions and 3 jingles to do, and I pulled up outside the studio in my nice little sports car, and I sat there, and I had this feeling in my body, and it was like, if I go in that studio, I'm going to die. I'm going to die physically, or something will die. And I drove off, and I left them really in deep doo-doo. It's a terrible thing to do. And so I became poor and happy again. And but
So what did you pursue at that point? Poor and
I
happy.
pursued playing. I wanted to play. I wanted to improvise. I was a jazz man, even though the 60s, it's complicated. I'm sorry, we're going to have to keep kind of recapitulating here, because I played mainly R&B in the 60s to survive. Georgie Fame of the Blue Flames, and then the band with Ginger Baker, Jack Bruce, and Graham Bond. I mean, there was some hard-hitting R&B, Mingus kind of influence, You remember Blues and Roots and Fables of Forpers with Danny Richmond. Great recordings, great. And he was a true inspiration. He was a true inspiration compositionally too, him and Monk. But so already by 1965, I was kind of bored with this kind of, classical jazz guitar tone. Yeah, I mean, I've been listening to Train. You hear Train all of Supreme, he's playing 3 notes at a time sometimes, I mean, and then Eric Clapton was doing great work with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. And then Jimmy came along and just turned everybody on their head. What he did with very little, a Marshall amp and a wah-wah pedal, unreal. And I, in some strange way, equated what Jimmy was doing with distortion with what Coltrane was doing with his horn. Musically, okay, worlds apart, but tonally, very similar. And I already, with playing with Ginger and Jack, I had to have a bigger amp because I wanted to get feedback. Yeah, I didn't want this cool guitar tone anymore, And anyway, as time went by, I'm sure you remember Dave Holland.
Sure.
And Dave and I, we were kind of, because I moved to Belgium in '68 to play with a free jazz group. I mean, free jazz, just like anarchy, okay? Which...
And you still weren't making any money?
No.
No, okay.
I was surviving though. And I realized that free jazz was not for me, because unless you're a perfect man and a perfect musician, it's a lot of self-indulgence. And it doesn't work. I like discipline. And but when I was in the UK, I was staying with Dave Holland. And Dave was in the house band at Ronnie's, one of the house bands in Ronnie's, where they would play with the great artists that would come from America, Sonny Rollins or Rasson Roland Kirk. I was in another house band, but it was more jazz R&B, Hammond organ trio. But one night, when Rasson was there, Rahsaan Roland Kirk, Rahsaan liked the way we played more than the band, more than the trio that was accompanying him. So he came in early because he wanted to play with us.
Wow.
So he came on stage and he jammed with us, to the great displeasure of Ronnie Scott, because his star is playing there before he should. But I'll never forget that experience. And at one point, when I had to solo, and Rahsaan went behind me with the 3 horns. I mean, it was like a big band right behind me. It was just, what a beautiful experience.
Wow.
In any event, in the summer of '68, Miles walked into Ronnie's, and Dave was playing, and he hired Dave. In the meantime...
Were you in the group too?
Not that group, no, he was with the real jazz group.
Okay.
Chang, Lang, no, but beautiful. Stan Tracy, under some great players in Britain at that time. In any event, while one of the times that I came back from Europe, staying with Dave, Bill Evans come into town, and Jack DeJohnette was playing with Bill, Eddie Gomez. And Jack loved to jam. And since Dave had been in Ronnie's, he knew Jack. And Jack invited us both down to have a jam in the afternoon at Ronnie Scott's. So we went down and we just jammed for a couple of hours. Unbeknownst to me, Jack had one of these, old Mission Impossible tape recorders, with the little reels. And he recorded it. And that's, in the meantime, Dave left to join Miles. And of course, we had some money, we'd call each other. And one day, I'm on the phone with him, and he said, I got somebody who wants to talk to you. And I said, oh, really? I'm thinking, no, it's not Miles, that's for sure. And Tony got on the phone, and he said, hey, nice to meet you. He said, Jack DeJohnette played me a jam of you and Dave and him, and I want you to come over and play with me. I'm in a band I'm forming. So
that's the story.
Was my link.
Yeah, okay. Hey, I want to go back just a minute with Coltrane. I had heard that, correct me if I'm wrong, that Coltrane wanted to hire Wes Montgomery for the band.
Did he really?
Band. Yeah.
Wow.
But Wes chose not to do it because he didn't want to comp for those long solos.
we all know about those solos. I don't know if the gentlemen know the story about Coltrane and his long solos with Miles.
Oh, go ahead.
No? When they come off stage, on the side of the stage, and piano solo, and Miles says to Train, why you play such long solos? And Train says, oh man, it's just like, I've got this device, and I get into this device, and then I figure, oh wow, there's another thing I can do, And before I know what's happening, I said, I'm in the middle of it, I don't know how to stop. Take the horn out of your mouth. Typical Miles, beautiful, straight to the point.
Well, let me throw this on top of that. I've done a lot of interviews, and I interviewed.
I bet you must know that story.
I know that story. I wanted you to say it. I interviewed Jimmy Heath, and he said in the late 50s and early 60s, when modal jazz was coming around, and it's like you'd have 16 bars of D minor, and he says that nobody knew how to end the solo because there was no 5/1.
Yeah.
So they just kept going. So I always thought that might have been part of Coltrane's reason for not knowing how to stop.
Could be. It could be. But you must have listened to him many hours. Mm-hmm. And I like the way, the impressions. The one that 64, 63 with McCoy and Elvin. And how he ends that. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. How he's coming out of the solo, and all of a sudden it's like he does this beautiful curve and moves ambiguously back into the theme. But why he would play so long, I don't know. But you listen to One Up, One Down, the life of the 5-spot. I mean, that's 27 minutes of transcendental music. For me, he could go on forever, as far as I'm concerned, because he captures me and that particular recording. I don't know why they waited so long to put it out, but it's another level from the Impressions recording. It's unbelievable what he's playing in this. It's astonishing, and you lose track of. I lose track of time. I don't even know. I only look. I see this is 27 minutes long. Wow. For me, jazz is a way of liberation. Mm-hmm. It can be. It can be. But then you ask yourself, liberation from what? And the answer, for me, the answer is to be free from myself. Mm-hmm. I want to lose myself completely, because and Coltrane is a perfect example of that. And the great players, they've lost themselves and they become greater as a result. So the whole secret of this freedom is not freedom from something other than your small self.
So describe that in yourself. How did you take this music and this message, bring it into your music, and so that you lost yourself?
I didn't try anything. For me, what was important was, particularly when I started, at the end of the 60s, I started doing yoga, a lot of yoga and meditation. And I got the invitation from Tony. And out of the blue, Miles hires me and we start recording. I start recording with Miles and doing concerts with Miles and doing concerts and recordings with Tony. I mean, how lucky can you get? But nevertheless, I was very much in my life story of the inner life story, because by the time I arrived in New York from Europe, I was really into my yoga. I was into my meditation. And New York is such a stimulating city, I got even deeper into it, almost out of necessity, because it's very, for a foreigner, and the first night I was there, I was in Harlem. I was in paradise. It's paradise for a European or a Brit to be in Harlem. In that time, in the 60s, mm-hmm. It was like, that's it, I could have kissed the ground. Amazing.
Did you feel intimidated coming to New York?
Yeah.
Overwhelmed?
Yeah. And I think this is one of the stimuli that encouraged me to pursue my inner life more deeply, and I did. I mean, before I ended up with Sri Chinmoy, who you mentioned before, who became my meditation guru for 5 years, I became very close to the Sufis. And for those who don't know, the Sufis is the mystic side of Islam. It's a very beautiful side. And for the Sufi, music and dance are sacred. And since I was very fortunate that Tony invited me, because Larry Young, Khalid Yassin, since he became a Muslim, mm-hmm. And we had no money, very little money. So Khalid and I, we always shared a room whenever we were on tour together. So we had a lot of discussions about Islam and about the Sufis and about the Sufi message, really. And anyone who's interested, they should read Hazrat Inayat Khan, who was originally brought the Sufi message to the West. And at that time, as luck would have it, his son, Pir Vilayat Khan, was running the Sufi Center in New York. Mm. So I used to go to the Sufi Center in New York, where I met Paul Motion, who was also fascinated by the Sufi movement. And we used to hang out actually in the Sufi Center in New York. And then one after the other, I was going to see this yogi and this yogini and this doing. Then I got with Vishnu Devananda and all this. And then finally I met with this bhakti yogi, Chinmoy. And that's where I really started diving deep into meditation.
Is that when you started moving towards Indian music?
No, it had already started.
Ah.
It started actually at the end of the 60s. a musician, South Indian Veena player called Balachanda.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know him. Marvelous player. What a marvelous player. String instrument, it's like the grandfather of the sitar, but much lower. And I loved this instrument. And at that time, I was very lucky coming to New York. New York has everything. And I was invited to a private concert by a North Indian Veena player, Dagar, playing the Rudra Veena. And this style of North Indian Veena is without percussion, but it is so deep. It's just break your heart, you know, in the right way. It's beautiful. And so already by '69, I wanted to learn Indian music theory. And so I had taken a flute teacher, an Indian flute teacher. He was teaching not bansuri, but the regular bamboo flute. And then in '72, I'd already begun the Mahavishnu Orchestra, but I was deep into my meditation. Mahavishnu was my spiritual name, which is why the band was called that. I became an extracurricular student of Dr. Ramanathan, who was teaching South Indian music at Wesleyan University in Connecticut. And I stayed with him for 2 years, up to the point where the Veena was taking over my life. And I'm not the kind of person who can play 2 instruments, unfortunately. So I had to let it go because I'm a guitar player. And by 1973, I'd met Zakir Hussain already in '69, and in '72 we jammed together in front of Ali Akbar Khan, the great sarod player. For him, I'd done a charity concert for his school in California, and Zakir was a teacher at the school, and I gave this concert in LA, and Zakir came down. He was in Northern California, and he said, Khan Sahib, Ali Akbar Khan Sahib wants to meet you just to say thank you. So we flew up to San Francisco, and I had my acoustic guitar with me. He had the tabla, and there we were. I mean, the height of pretension. When I think about it, unbelievable. Because not him, me, because he's masterful. He's the greatest tabla player alive. I think he already was then, but certainly today. And so I'm there, and I say, "Hey, man, you want to jam?" You know, ridiculous. And Ali Akbar Khan Sahib is sitting there, you know, and he's smoking his cigarette. He said, "Yeah, let's just jam." So we sat in front of him and we just played. But it was amazing. It was amazing. And from that point, and I mean, this 72, 71. We became very dear friends, and so by '73, I was coming out of my Veena teaching with Ramanathan from Connecticut, and I'd met L. Shankar, who was also a teacher there, and I said, we have to make a band out of this. So I called Zakir and I called Shankar, and I used the percussion player who was the player of my teacher, Ramanathan. And that was Shakti. It was 1973, so it's gone back quite a while. So you can see what kind of fascination I had for Indian music, because they're great improvisers. It's not a coincidence that John Coltrane's son is called Ravi, because they knew each other very well. And I had the great fortune to become an extracurricular student of Pandit Ravi Shankar in 1974. And he taught me South Indian theory. And he's a North Indian musician, Hindustani musician.
Why did he
But
do
they
that?
knew, because he was the guru. He knew what I wanted to learn. I wasn't a sitar player. He took me out of the kindness of his heart. So he'd come to New York, he'd call me, he'd say, just come over. And so, you know, I would go over there and just talk to him, and he would talk to me. I'd go and get some tea and cake and whatever, you know, and just have the honor of his presence. And one day he said, I'm going to teach you Konakol, which is the South Indian, you know, that's just how you sing the rhythms. And he taught me that.
But wasn't
Pretty
teaching
amazing,
prioritory? I say that Hariprad Tracia. Didn't he learn to play the flute backwards because he went to another teacher, or he was studying with somebody first, and then he went to the master, and the master
didn't
said,
know that.
I'm going to play it this way. So when somebody from the West goes over to study, or to study with the masters, I think it would be not more like this, but they were inviting for you to teach you this language.
Oh yeah, I've had many years of association with Indian musicians, and particularly after I realized this little story with the veena I told you, I abandoned the veena, and I abandoned any pretension I had to play classical Indian music, because I'm a jazz player. I was always a jazz player. I love jazz. I love rock and roll too, and I love Indian music. I love flamenco music. I love all kinds of music. You know, they've all had an impact on me. But one thing's for sure is that the Indian musicians, the ones I play with, they're not interested in me being a classical Indian music player. They want to know about my music. They want to know about Western music, and they want to know how we can relate to each other. Of course, it really helps for the Westerner if he knows the rules and regulations governing Indian music. In fact, just out of respect, I think an effort should be made in that direction. But they're learning harmony. They have nothing to learn from a rhythmical point of view because they're masterly at it. But harmonically, they're becoming more and more sophisticated, which is the Occidental influence, our influence.
So when you learned this, it was a steep learning curve?
Very
steep, right?
Yeah, right.
Because I love Shakti, I love all that music
me
that
too.
you do, but it just seems like this is your music. It doesn't seem like you're like the odd man out. You're part of that ensemble.
I loved it, and I think that's a key word. I think if you love something, then it'll come to you, and it did. And it still does. I mean, we haven't since the last concert I had with my Indian friends was December 2013, because a few months later we lost the great mandolin Srinivas to liver failure, 45 years old. And in a way, we haven't gotten over it. I know it's 2016, 2017. But it's so hard. We were together 14 years. And I know nobody's irreplaceable, but it's really hard because it's really hard. It's difficult.
Just sitting here talking to you, I can tell how deeply the passion is in music. It's not just, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then this guy called me, and this guy, but it's years and years of dedication and passion and love.
It's my road.
Yeah.
It's my road in life. It's my way.
Well, let me lighten.
It's yours too, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah,
let me ask you, let's move. I had, maybe I heard you say this on an interview, was that Miroslav Vitus invited you to form a band with Wayne Shorter and Joe Zawinul at one point.
Yeah. Well, Miroslav and I were real close. We met in the UK. I met him when he was with Stan Getz. We were playing at Ronnie's.
Wow.
Only Stan brought his own band. Miroslav was in it. And we started to hang out. And I love Miroslav. He's a crazy guy, crazy Czech, but very interesting. And we were both, I got involved in the study of the philosophical tarot already by 1963. This was very interesting. It's based on the Kabbalah, which itself is based on the Egyptian mysteries, of geometry, the pyramids, the divine proportions, which are very relative in music. In any event, we started to hang out because we had this in common, because he loved the tarot too. He used to read cards, he used to read hands. Yeah, he was really into it. And so, we met regularly, we used to hang out. We were not playing together. Yeah, he was off doing different things. But let's fast forward or rewind to, I would say, October 1970. And I was doing a gig with Miles at Lenny's on the Turnpike.
Wow.
Out of Boston,
Right.
on the Turnpike. Yeah, and that was the band with Gary and Keith and Michael and Jack. Great band. Only with, I hadn't had it together that night. I didn't have it together. And Miles, you know, just the two of us were in the band room, and he said, "You didn't have your shit together tonight." And I said, "I know, Miles, I know, man." I know, I felt terrible. But, you know, it happens. And, but then he was always encouraging, you know. I mean, he would tell it right up front. If you didn't have it together, you had it right in your face, you know. But that's the best way, that's the best school. And so, you know, I'm trying to like commiserate, or he's commiserating with me. And then out of the blue he said, "John, it's time you form your own band." Now that was a shock. That was a bolt of light from the heavens, because he's the most honest man I'd ever met. He was brutally honest, but he never played with you. That was it. And I'm thinking, I gotta form my own band. That's the last thing from my mind. I just want to play with him. I'm playing with Tony. My life is beautiful. Don't bother me, you know. But he said it, and I revere him to this day. I revered him then, and I had to do it to justify him and his faith in me. It sounds weird, but I had to do it. So as soon as I got home, I'm starting to think, okay, I'm going to make a band. I wanted violin, my mother's instrument. Mm-hmm. And I had, Jan wasn't in the band. I had Billy, I had Rick, and I had Jerry. Mm-hmm. And now out of the blue, I got a call from Miroslav, and he said, "John, putting a band together with Wayne and Joe. We want you in the band." You know? Oh my God. And I said, "Oh man, I would love to be in that band, but I'm under orders. I'm under orders from Miles. I gotta do my own thing. I gotta make my own band." He said, "Oh well, I can dig it." He said, "But listen, if you want a piano player," I said, "I'm looking for a piano player." He said, "Jan Hammer." It's another guy from Prague. He's out in California playing with Sarah Vaughan. I said, "Well, he's playing with Sarah Vaughan. He's no slouch," because Sarah was something else. Yeah. She was something else. So, and I said, "But you know, he's got a good gig." "Yeah, but he's looking for out. He wants to move out. Wants to move out musically." Mm-hmm. I said, "Well, maybe he's the one." So I got his number from Miroslav, thanks to Miroslav, and I called him, and Jan was like, "Let's do it," you know, and that was the first band.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did you have early success with that band?
Did I what?
Early success, like from the minute you
Too
guys...
much.
Too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the reason I say that is I've interviewed people like Ralph Towner and John Abercrombie, and these guys, they said when they came to New York, they were all in Mahavishnu cover bands.
Yeah, it was weird. It was the last thing I expected.
Yeah.
I'd never done anything. I'd had my commercial thing when I was a Studio Shock in the 60s, and I never wanted to go back. It was either they take me or they don't, you know, but whatever, you do or you die. Let's go, you gotta go for your dream.
Yeah.
And so the band was just what I wanted to do, but don't forget, I just had 2 years with Tony. And the thing about Tony, because, you know, Miles wanted me in his band all the time. And the most ironic situation for me, like 9 months of being with Tony and Miles, was Miles asked me to join his, to leave Tony and join his band Tony. And I said, "Miles, I'm not able to do that, because Tony gives me something." "Oh yeah, I know." You know, of course he knew what Tony Tony was doing to me and Larry and to anybody we played with. The thing about Tony, compared to the situation with Miles, is that Tony loved what I was writing, and he encouraged me. So most of the Mahavishnu music that came out in the early record, the work was done with Lifetime. With Miles, because I used to go, he'd be inviting me to his house all the time when I was free, over on 77th. And I'd take the guitar, you know, and we'd be there, it's just the two of us, and he'd say, he'd hit a chord. What do you hear? He wanted a guitar. He wanted a guitar, just like Tony wanted a guitar player. I just happened to be there. I was lucky. But since the whole of the 60s, I was R&B, funk, James Brown, and that's where he wanted to go. He wanted R&B.
Yeah.
Jack Johnson, classic example.
Right.
Classic example. Because he didn't have any music for that session. And I don't know if musically you know about the Dance of Maya, but we were all waiting at Billy. That's where I met Billy for the first time. That's where we hooked up. And Miles was talking to Tio Macero for about 20 minutes in the control room, and I'm bored. So I started playing these changes that subsequently became the Dance of Maya. Only I just started doing a shuffle, R&B shuffle. Can you hear it? I mean, that's, and Billy hit a beat. Michael Henderson came in, and we hit a groove. Miles ran in the studio with his trumpet playing, and he went on to play a 15-minute solo of the lights I'd never heard in my life. And that was right off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, it was just a total jam. It was a total jam. But that's where Miles wanted to go. I mean, you could hear it later. I mean, okay, he went into his semi-retirement, you know, because he wasn't well at all. And when he came out, I mean, he was musically transformed in a way, wasn't he?
Absolutely. How is it that Miles named a tune after you?
I'll never know the answer to this question. I don't know.
Did you know that was going to be named
Not
you
at
until
all.
the record came out?
Nothing. But I know every time, I mean, what I just said, I was going over to his house on a regular basis, and every time I'd say goodbye, he'd stuff a $100 bill in my pocket and just say, make sure you eat. You know?
Wow.
He was beautiful. He really took care of me. Actually, I don't think I would have survived without Miles in New York. Because with Tony, Larry and me were making $20 a night. You know? Okay, it was 1969, 1970, so it was more. But it was hard to survive, even so.
You know, a friend of mine is Badal Roy that said that.
Badal Roy?
Yes.
He's the one I introduced to Miles.
Well, he told me that story, that he was working in the window at an Indian restaurant and you would come by and jam with him.
Oh yeah.
Is that the story?
Badal Roy. Yeah, because he's on that acoustic album I did for Douglas Records. My Goals Beyond.
My Goals Beyond.
Yeah. He's on the side B.
Yeah.
With Liebman, Billy's on that, Jerry's on that.
on it.
Yeah. Badal Roy. Yeah.
And you play a Mingus tune on there too.
Mingus, yeah. Well, what a tune.
Yeah.
Pork by Hat.
Yep.
What a killer tune that is. But Mingus had a thing. I love Mingus.
Well, let me ask you, you know, you talked about 1959 as a seminal year for Kind of Blue.
Yeah.
But it was also Mingus Aum.
Yes.
It was Shape of Jazz to Come, Ornette.
Ornette,
It
yes.
was Dave Brubeck's Time Out, and it was Giant Steps.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, Verve Records, the guy that ran Verve Records, what's his name? Norman
Verve?
Granz.
Oh yeah. Jazz at the Phil.
He decided that in 1959, 1960, jazz was dead, and he sold Verve Records.
Wow.
So he later started Pablo Records, but he thought that the new wave of music was not something that was marketable, maybe.
Well, That's funny, because I would have figured that he'd be a little more far-seeing.
Well, his guys were Oscar Peterson and
I know.
Charlie Parker and Lester Young.
I mean, I grew up, I
Yeah.
used to listen to Jazz at the Phil. They were great records.
Yeah.
Oscar Peterson, that trio, with Herb Ellis or with what's the other guitar player?
Wasn't Oscar Moore? That was
No,
with-
no,
that
no.
was King
Oscar
Cole.
Moore, he was with
King Cole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barney Kessel.
Barney Kessel. Yeah.
Yeah. Ray Brown. But I was happy, even though the guitar player was in there, I was happy when Ed Thigpen joined his band. Because I love Oscar. But he got real criticized. He got too much technique, playing too many notes.
Yeah.
But almost the best I ever heard. Did you ever hear the Miles in Stockholm?
Yes.
So you had the interview with the Swedish interviewer with Coltrane. It's on the
I
record.
think so. Yes.
But do you remember what he's saying? I mean, he was so rude. Not rude, but he clearly had no idea what Train was doing. And on the microphone he's saying, people say you have a really ugly sound, and you have no tone, I mean, really, Coltrane's sound. Man, what a sound. And Coltrane was so gracious, and he says, yeah, I know, I'm working on it, I want to get a better sound, I mean, and this moron is just like, no idea. But the interviews on the CD is crazy.
Boy.
But you see, I mean, there's always been people. But the thing is, the purists are everywhere. I mean, a lot of people I've worked with, Zakir Hussain from Tabla, severely criticized by the purists, the classical purists. Mahavishnu orchestras, this is not jazz. Paco de Lucia, very criticized by the flamenco purists for playing with me. What are you going to do? Listen to these people? They think they know what the real thing is?
Right.
I mean,
The thing is,
unbelievable.
I know who you are, but I don't know who those purists are.
You don't know who?
I don't know the flamenco purists. They never came over. They never crossed over to most of us. We know John
Well,
McLaughlin.
they're there,
Yeah.
believe me.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Well, let me ask you. We have a couple more minutes here.
Okay.
Is there what else? What else are you preparing to do in music? You've done so much, and like you said, you're not dead yet.
No, I'm not dead yet. Well, my association with India is not dead either, because that's a country I really, truly love, and the people in it also. And I don't know if you know, did you ever see the Remember Shakti with Shankar Mahadevan, the singer? Shankar and I have been working on a project for over a year now, about 18 months, whereby it's a new way of bringing East and West together, but it's bringing my classical education into it. So we'll both he'll be singing, and the parts where I'll be playing also, but it's with kind of orchestra. So I'm busy orchestrating.
Wow.
It's really, really exciting, and so Shankar is very excited, but it's something that neither of us have ever heard before. So in a way, but it's an artistic endeavor, and we've got about 3 pieces now that we're going to put out eventually, and but it's just for people to enjoy. If they enjoy it, fine, Anyway, there's no record industry, is there?
Well,
who's selling records anymore?
But
It's terrible.
I mean, I'm certainly listening to records. Remember Shakti is one of my favorite records. There's a Zakir Hussain record.
Making music.
Making music is gorgeous.
With Jan
Oh my
Garbarek.
God. There's another guy that's transcended into the East.
Well, he's not alone. I mean, Charlie Mariano,
Yes.
another one. Don Cherry. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
listen.
Not to mention train. Let's not forget
I'm not
train.
going to forget train. Hey, is there any final words of advice you can give to all the people that are going to watch this today? What can you inspire them to? Because the music business is upside down now, and
Yeah.
but it has to. But for
the
you,
music
it's-
business is in a terrible state, but it is my profound conviction that to be a musician is the greatest privilege I feel blessed to be a musician. I think it's a great honor. And it doesn't come without its price and without its sacrifices, because it demands everything from you. It wants all your inner resources as well as your exterior resources.
Mhm.
It needs all of you. And it will take all of you. But what music gives back is infinitely more than what we give to it. It's really the most rewarding of occupations.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
We can't say anything more than that today.
Me either.
Thank
Thanks,
you, John.
Dave. Thank you.
Bye-bye.